Seeing this, Chen Kong quickly stepped forward and stood in front of the bed. Princess Yu, these two imperial doctors are all given by the emperor. Their medical skills will never have any problems. I don't need you to worry. Please leave quickly. Seeing all the people in the room face each other coldly, they don't want to treat themselves. The stranger is angry and helpless. The emperor's personal gift doesn't mean there's no mistake. Your Highness's illness can't be delayed. If you continue to do so, you are really delaying your Highness's illness. Chen Kong looked back at Yin Sichuan's face and became more and more angry. Drive them all out to the king. As soon as the words fell, Yin Beiqing strode in, surrounded by a group of soldiers. However, his words had been heard for a long time, but none of the soldiers dared to move. If they were the princes next to him, they would be able to win the battle. They can see the prestige of Yin Beiqing. Are you dying? How dare you turn a deaf ear to Wang Ye's words? The flower on the street sees shape, complexion instantly cold come down. The face has no facial expression of scold away. Mo Shanghua's means are clear all over the palace. Her words are better than Yin Beiqing's. When people listen to her, they are excited. They are ordered to escort Chen Kong and others for a while. Are you crazy? Chen Kong and others are angry and anxious and can't help struggling violently. Mo Shanghua arranges the medicine bag in his hand and opens his mouth without raising his head. Take them all first. All the accompanying bodyguards went with Zhao Wei to suppress the bandits. At present, the rest of Chen Kong are just some servants. Naturally, there is no room for resistance. No matter how unwilling he is still driven out. Without the disturbance of Chen Kong and others, Mo Shanghua can calm down and treat Yin Sichuan himself. Qinya greets the two boys to move in a bath bucket for bathing, and then sends them to pour the cold water just from the well. You two hold him down first. Mo Shanghua glances at Yin Sichuan, who is protecting his clothes on the bed. He orders without raising his head. Then, she looked inside the medicine bag, pinched a small porcelain bottle, crushed all the pills, poured them into the bath bucket, and said, "Take off his clothes and help him into the bucket." The two boys nodded and hurriedly went to solve Yin Sichuan's clothes. Qinya was thin-skinned. Then she turned away, but the flowers on the street looked like nothing. Suddenly, a pair of rough hands will be covered on her cheek, her face suddenly black. Behind Yin Beiqing's slightly childish voice then rang out. Men and women give and receive each other. Your things are finished. It's time to go out with the king. Mo Shanghua brushed his hand and shook his head solemnly. I told you before that there is no difference between men and women in the eyes of doctors. Now I'm responsible for detoxification for him. If you have time, you might as well go to find out what's going on. He has such dirty things in our house, but you can't afford to eat them. Yin Beicheng glanced at Yin Sichuan, who had been mixed into the bath bucket by the young man. He looked away from him uncomfortably. The man under his hand is now in a good mood. He just wants to eat you and me. What can he ask? Between speaking, his Mao Guang can't help but turn from Yin Sichuan's naked body again, and suddenly take a step to walk out. I'm going to wait for you outside. Mo Shanghua didn't take it seriously. He turned his eyes to see Yin Sichuan's state at this time. Yin Sichuan, who had just turned red and kept holding onto his clothes, was sitting quietly in the bucket with his eyes closed. But it didn't last long. After a while, his face turned white again. Covered his chest with one hand, and his eyebrows wrinkled painfully. Quickly lift the people out, scrub them clean, and carefully put them back on the bed. The flower on the road has been expected to be general, not urgent, not slow command way. The boys helped to come forward. Qinya is not shy. Busy also brought cotton cloth to help wipe. Then, Mo Shanghua carefully diagnosed his pulse and temporarily relieved Yin Sichuan's pain by acupuncture. So he sent someone to put Chen Kong and others in. As soon as they came in, they rushed to Yin Sichuan. Two imperial doctors feel their pulse in a hurry, while Chen Kong urges them anxiously, be more careful. If something happens to your highness, we'll all wait to lose our heads together. These words are impatient words, and they are also meant to be heard by strangers. However, after examining the pulse condition, The two imperial doctors were surprised. One of them, puzzled and surprised, looked at Chun Kong. Poison His Highness's body is no different. Mo Shanghua wiped the thin sweat on his forehead and said faintly, I'm just helping him with his old disease. You take care of it all the year round. It's better for you, too, to prescribe the tonic prescription. After a pause, he looked at Chun Kong with his eyes. Your Highness has had an accident 3 or 4 times in our house. You always have to investigate it clearly. Later, you will come out and explain what happened. With that, he stepped out, leaving Chun Kong and others in astonishment. Before reaching the location of Yinbei City, Qinya grabbed her skirt in a hurry. Mo Shanghua squats down and looks back at Qinya in confusion. Qinya pulls the flower on the street and whispers a few words. The faint light in the flower eyes on the street turns slightly, but there has not been much fluctuation on the face. Chun Kong looked at Yin Sichuan's situation inside the house and saw that he was okay. Then he went out of the inner room and told the truth about what had just happened outside. Pingji was also brought here soon. My lord, it is this lady who wants to talk to our Highness. I don't know whether it is intentional or unintentional, so she falls on him. His Highness is always in bad health. Only in this way can the old disease recur. As for the flattering drug, I'm afraid it's not related to this lady. What the hell are you talking about, you slave dog? Seeing this, Pingji immediately refuted. I'm the concubine of the Lord. How can I understand the word women's way? And how can I get those dirty medicines? That's right. I should use them on the Lord. When can I get a foreigner? It's not the words of a young man, but the words of dozens of pairs of eyes. What else can my wife deny? Chun Kong sneered. I remember that when your Highness had the symptoms of poisoning at the beginning, it seemed that when his wife wrapped his Highness's wound with a handkerchief, the handkerchief was stained with his Highness's blood. Afterwards, the handkerchief disappeared. How dare your wife take it out for the imperial doctor to have a test? Pingji's face changed. She held her hands together nervously and looked at Yin Beicheng. My lord, I'm wronged. It's clear that these dog slaves are afraid of taking responsibility. They deliberately put the responsibility on me. You can make decisions for me. Chun Kang's face was suddenly dyed with anger, and he forced his anger to speak. Prince and princess, how dare we deceive so many things we see with our own eyes? Mo Shanghua and Yin Beicheng sat side by side. At this time, hearing the words, he said, Lord, this happened near my yard. My girl also saw it. Let her talk about it. Yan Beicheng nodded, and immediately a servant girl came out and knelt down beside Pingji. The servant girl is responsible for sweeping in the dockyard. When the incident happened, she heard the news and rushed out. She only saw Mrs. Ping scramble up from the ground in a hurry. She didn't know where she had gone, and the rest didn't know. Mo Shanghua nodded slightly and waved her hand to let her go for a while. Lord, everyone has identified it. This matter has been ordered. You can deal with it. Pingji, who had just been killed, changed her normal state. She was shocked and indignant, staring at the flowers on the street. Princess, I've covered this matter for you, and you've fallen down like this. Well, in that case, don't think about it. Then she knelt to the front and said, My lord, I'm really wronged. It's clear that the princess had an old love affair with her 13 Highness in the imperial city. She never forgot that. She wanted to seduce her 13 Highness to continue her relationship. Then she instructed me to find a way to lead her Highness to a hiding place. After giving her convenience, she gave her the magic medicine. She put her hands on Yin Beicheng's knees and said sincerely, You know, Lord, how can ordinary people find the flattering medicine? Except for Dr. Liu, only the princess is proficient in medicine. If you don't believe me, you can go to her hospital and search for the remaining medicine. Wang Yi, I'm forced by her. I'm innocent. The sight of the people in the house immediately gathered on the flower. Yin Beicheng also looked at her, as if waiting for her to explain. The flower on the road droops the Mao light to glance at Pingji. The lip cape is slightly cocked up, containing a touch of radiance that seems to smile not to smile. Do you mean this? She took out a small porcelain vase from her sleeve between her green fingers. There were not too many patterns or obvious marks on the bottle, but it was strangely stained with some soil. When Pingji Dun's face changed greatly, he squeezed his hands tightly together, and the place where they overlapped became white. Ow, how? Imo Shanghua got up slowly. Her face was calm, and her lips opened and closed to explain. This is what Pingji said. It's just that I didn't give it to him, as she said. Today, she sneaked into my bedroom, buried it in the flower pot in my room, and was knocked down by my maid. Her intention is clearly that she couldn't seduce me. When he saw that he was not far away from my courtyard, he decided to blame me. Chinya stepped forward 2 steps and blessed herself with a salute. She said, Prince, I went back to get some things from the princess. I met Mrs. Ping in the princess's bedroom. She said at that time that she just came to compensate the princess, but the maidservant has not seen that he is empty-handed, and even he doesn't bring his maid, so he comes to make amends. Okay, what a stranger. Since she didn't intend to leave her away to live, she wanted her to fall into the abyss. Unexpectedly, Pingji, who had been extremely nervous, suddenly calmed down. There was a strange and vicious color at the bottom of her eyes. The princess is really the princess. She had already made a perfect plan. The eyebrows on the street are slightly picked up, and a few microwaves are rippling in the quiet eyes. What do you mean? Pingji's lips were slightly checked. Then, she suddenly rushed to Yin Beicheng and said, My lord, I know that you won't believe what I'm saying now. But if I have evidence, I can't prove myself innocent. It's enough to prove that the princess is immoral. She's a man of snakes and scorpions with different appearances. The next second, Pingji took out a neatly folded paper from her sleeve and unfolded it slowly in front of the crowd. Did you ever remember Shuiji's woman book? Yes, I went to the princess's house, but not to frame it, but to find the princess's evidence. The emperor is not responsible for the people's heart, but always let the maidservant find it. In this way, it can also prove that the detailed words are not false. When Yin Beicheng glanced at the Wanman book, the dark color at the bottom of his eyes suddenly flashed. He got up and looked at it closely, but he didn't understand it. He said, A Wanman book just appeared a few days ago, and now another one comes out. Shursen also said that it's hard to raise money. Now, in my opinion, it's obviously like Xiaosheng who sells paintings on the street. It's very common. Qing on one side was also surprised. Obviously, she was not aware of it. Seeing that Yin Beicheng said so, she quickly added, This book of all people is so valuable. How can it be easily obtained? It must be false because it has been true before. Imo Shanghua didn't rush to open her mouth. Instead, she narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at the Wanman book in Pingji's hand. Pingji's complacency could hardly be concealed. Lord, what's the credibility of a cheap maidservant's words? Besides, she framed the maidservant and concubine first. Not to mention that, but according to the rules, no servant in the house dares to interrupt when the masters speak. In this way, I think the following crimes are worthy of death. Chinya did not react. Imo Shanghua got up and pressed her shoulder. She knelt down and stood in front of her. Chinya, admit your mistake to the Lord. It is clear that she is disrespectful to Pingji, but she does not let Pingji admit her mistake in Chinya dynasty. Instead, she admits her mistake in Yin Beicheng. In Pingji's eyes, this is clearly hitting her in the face. Just want to be unfair with Yin Beicheng, but didn't expect. He just played sloppy, said, Go out and kneel. Wait for now things. I have free time to punish. Knowing that they were protecting themselves, Chinya quickly closed her mouth, kowtowed, and retreated without saying a word. Lord, Pingji's face suddenly showed some dissatisfaction, and her eyes were as vicious as vines, which covered her whole eyes. The book of all people is absolutely true. You see, now it's not the maidservant who is dissatisfied with the princess, but the whole Yuzhou people are dissatisfied with the princess. You don't care about your maidservant and concubine, and you also have to worry about the people in the whole city. This is when you go to the imperial city. You must be the emperor. He must return peace to Yuzhou, and will not easily indulge such poisonous women. Yin Beicheng didn't say anything, but the house suddenly fell into a dead silence. It was so quiet that the needle could be heard. For a long time, the room suddenly rang out a shallow cough, and then he saw that Yin Xuan, who should have been lying in the inner room to rest, came in slowly with the help of his little friend. His steps were flighty, his face was pale, his eyes were as clear and gentle as water. His voice was as elegant and gentle as ever, and he was slightly ill. "Brother," although the maidservant is a servant, what he said is not unreasonable. There was a plague in Anzhou in the previous dynasty, and the local officials tried to seal the city and let the people live and die. In such a great difficulty, the people just gathered together and wrote down the Book of the People was sent to the imperial city after going through all kinds of difficulties and dangers. It can be seen that the Book of the People is difficult to obtain. Now one copy of the Book of the People is rare. How can a second copy come out? Lord, when Pingji heard the speech, she couldn't help jumping in her heart and interrupted in a hurry. Your Highness 13 is defending the princess so much. It can be seen that their private relationship is not false. I didn't lie before. The cold light suddenly rose in the flower eyes on the street, and the red lips slowly said, "Pingji, don't you want to die? Even your 13 highnesses dare to slander you." Pingji's face turned white, holding the so-called Wanmin book's hand and shrinking. "I think you know better than me if I'm slandering." Yin Xuan, who had always been gentle, was a little bit heavy at the moment. "The two of us are pure and innocent, and we don't have any private affairs. This lady is still cautious, and now is not the time to say that." With that, he glanced at Chen Kong, standing on one side. Chen Kong and look at each other, immediately understand, go forward to Pingji in the hands of Wanmin book took over, presented to Yin Xuan in the hands. Yin Xuan took it and watched it carefully. Juanxio's eyebrows frowned gently from time to time. "I just said that there must be a fake in the two books of the people, but I'm afraid I can't see it just by my own strength. Brother, let's identify the person who is responsible for the Book of the People according to the two books of the people. It's too much trouble to use it." Yin Beicheng took the Wanmin book as if he really knew it very well. He stroked his chin with one hand and studied it carefully. His brows were very tangled. Seeing this, Yin Xuan said in a warm voice, "Brother, in my opinion, you'd better find the initiator as soon as possible. Only in this way can you convince the public. Can also save her if not. It proves that this book is true. Would it not tell the world that Princess Yu is a demon girl who harms the country and the people, which not only causes the resistance of the people in the house, but also makes the people dislike her? I'm afraid that if the emperor disposes of such a demon girl, she will not just give up. Therefore, he has tens of millions of selfishness. At this time, he must give up. As for Imo Shanghua, he didn't speak at this time. He was silent and thought about the countermeasures quickly in his mind. She had taken back the Wanmin book from Nanha before. She thought it might be of some use in the future, so she left it. However, what happened yesterday happened. She forgot it for a moment and made it Pingji's weapon. It was really funny and angry. However, what she didn't expect was that Yin Beicheng, who was still seriously studying the Wanmin book last second, suddenly tore down the corner of the paper. He was also very surprised. What's more, he didn't expect that when the paper was short, his strength also loosened. The paper fell on the ground, and then it spontaneously ignited without fire. After a while, it was determined by Pingji that the paper that could kill people would be reduced to ashes. Pingji was stunned for a moment. It took a long time for her to react. Looking at Yin Beicheng, her face turned red instantly, and her eyes were full of anger. How can this be possible? It must be deceitful. How can you protect that bitch like this? Imo Shanghua is holding the Wanmin book with only one corner left in his hand, full of innocent faces. "I don't know what's going on. Why do you want to blame me like this? Pingji, how dare you accuse the Lord? Is it not fatal to commit such a crime?" Imo Shanghua clearly sees a flash of sparks in Yin Beicheng's sleeve, but he deliberately staggers his eyes and scolds. Pingji's resentment could not be concealed in any way. She stamped her foot with hatred and said, "Even so, the book of all people is true. Please follow the people's wishes and divorce this poisonous woman. She is not worthy to be my princess of Yujo at all." Then she knelt down after lifting her skirt. She glared at the girl behind her. She was so scared that she knelt down and added, "Please, please, obey the people, obey the people's will." Yin Beiqing touched his nose and said innocently, "All the books of the people are gone. How can I punish him? What's more, I don't know whether the book is true or not. What's more, the princess was married by her father and the emperor himself. It's not the king who said that she could give up. But now there's no evidence. How do you want the king to write?" Pingji has been dizzy with anger. If she doesn't die today, she can only die. Her hands tightly grasp Yin Beiqing's sleeve robe, as if grasping the last straw. The book of the people is clearly true. Even if there is no such book, she has also committed 7 crimes. You must not indulge him like this. The color of Flower Eyes on the street has been completely Pingji down, just like looking at a clown, staring at her with a smile. "Pingji, which of the things you said has a certificate? Since there is no certificate, where do you have the courage to slander the princess, seduce the outsider, and harm the prince here?" From the beginning, Pingji's plan was not formed. If the series of plans were not coherent, even the only evidence could not stand it. It was extremely stupid to take the initiative to send the handle to others. I'm afraid even Yunji would not make such low-level mistakes. With so many charges deducted, Pingji turned pale in a flash, but she didn't want to be defeated. She said fiercely, "You're bullshit. What I said is true. You are a snake and scorpion. I will tear you up even if I fight to death today." Yin Beiqing, who had just turned pale, suddenly became dark. "Pingji, you've done so many things. Do you still want to let Sure-san see jokes now? Somebody, take her down." Seeing that a young man had already surrounded her, Pingji was immediately flustered and said, "My lord, I am wronged. I am wronged. It's the slut who framed the concubine." However, those boys didn't give her the chance to explain, so they suppressed her. Pingji is not willing to be so constrained. Her brain has already been filled with despair and fear. She raised her hand and bit a boy's hand. She took the opportunity to struggle out and rush to the flowers on the street. Yin Xuan and others are here. The flowers on the street are always showing their martial arts. Therefore, Pingji gets it all at once, and they roll together. She pinched the flower's neck, and her hair was in a bun. She was half mad and half resentful, and said in a shrill voice, "Even if I die, you need to give me a cushion. No, I can't. How can that be enough?" The viciousness in her eyes almost solidified into substance, and her slender nails scratched over her face, which was as tender and white as the flower on the street. Seeing this, Yin Beiqing immediately clenched his hands into fists. Regardless of this, he went forward to pull Pingji up, forced him apart, and threw him aside. Then he hurried to the front of Mo Shanghua, holding her face carefully. "Pingji is too crazy. Rao, is Yinbei's city fast enough?" The white and tender cheek of the flower on the street is still marked with a bloodstain, and the blood beads the size of soybeans are pouring out. "Take her down quickly." Yin Xuan wanted to come forward, but seeing that Yin Beiqing was so nervous, he quickly suppressed his worries and turned to the people in the room. With the incident just now, the bodyguards in the house were all on the alert. Many people gathered around them, tied Pingji up and blocked her mouth, and then pulled her down in a hurry. Brother Huang, Sister Huang, Yin Xuan stood by for a while, but he still couldn't hold back his worry. He was about to ask, but before he finished, he saw that Yin Beiqing had directly picked up the flowers on the street and walked out in a hurry. His eager heart was suddenly poured cold water, and he didn't know what it was like. "I'm fine." Along the way, Yin Beiqing clings to Mo Shanghua. It's useless for her to struggle. Until Wu Yuan, he relaxes his strength. Before he can put her on the bed, she jumps out of his arms and speaks faintly. Seeing her indifferent appearance, Yin Beiqing frowned and raised his hand as if he wanted to touch her wound. However, he was afraid of hurting her. For a moment, he had no way to start, but he was confused by the flowers on the street. Looking at her blank appearance, he couldn't help pinching her good cheek on the other side. Stupid woman, how can you not defend yourself in that situation? If she's crazy and pulls off her hairpin to stab you, do you want to be obedient? Mo Shanghua blinked her eyes, her long eyelashes stirred up like wings. So many people from the Imperial City are staring at me. Can I slack off? What's more, there's so many people here. How can they all sit back and ignore me? Anyway, I have nothing to do. It's Pingji. Originally, there might be a way to live, but now I'm afraid the only way to live is gone. If you dare to hurt the woman of the king, it's not too much to split up. Mentioned here, Yin Beiqing's originally quiet eyes were suddenly dyed with some violent color, and the bottom of his eyes was dark. Mo Shanghua's heart warmed, and the corner of his lips could not help but gently hook. Unexpectedly, it affected the wound on his cheek. Suddenly, another blood bead came out, dripping on the back of Yin Beiqing's hand, like hot molten iron, pulling his thoughts back. What's the matter? Why is it still dripping blood? It's just a scratch. Normally, it should scab soon. But when the wound reached the cheek of Mo Shanghua, not only it didn't scab, it was still bleeding. Yin Beiqing was shocked. Mo Shanghua raised her hand and touched the wound on her cheek. Looking at the scarlet color on her fingertips, she didn't touch her face too much. Pingji's nails are usually well-maintained, and she often uses danku to dye her fingers, so it's not easy to heal the wound naturally. But you just don't have to worry. I'm a doctor myself. How can I hurt myself? With that, she went around Yin Beiqing, took out a wooden box from the small table at the head of the bed, took out 2 small porcelain boxes, and sat down in front of the dressing mirror. In one of the porcelain boxes, she made a disinfectant cotton with cotton wadding and purified spirits. A small wooden tweezers was also stored in the box. She took a piece of disinfectant cotton out of the tweezers and wiped the wound quietly against the blurred bronze mirror. This bronze mirror is not as clear as the current mercury mirror. It can only barely see a fuzzy figure. Therefore, she wiped it with a little effort, and she accidentally painted it in the wrong place several times. When Yin Beiqing saw this, he took the forceps in her hand and was about to help her wipe the wound. The strong smell of wine at the tip of his nose made him move. He could not help but put his strange cotton wadding to the tip of his nose and sniffed it. The original strong smell of wine suddenly became more and more pungent. Although he was strange in his heart, when he smelled the pungent taste of wine, his eyebrows suddenly frowned deeply, and his hands also stopped. Did you soak it with strong liquor? If you use this, isn't it extremely painful? But just now he saw that she did not say a word, as if the whole body of meat is not her own. Such a shallow wound, where can it hurt? Mo Shanghua gently shakes his head. Seeing his ink, he raises his hand to take back the tweezers and wipe it by himself. Yin North City big hand toward the side to hide, then easily evaded her hand. No, you are so cruel to yourself, or this king to help you. After a pause, he seemed to think of something. He fixed his eyes on the flower's delicate cheek. If it hurts, just shout it out. No one will laugh at you. Shout out. The flower on the street is slightly stunned. She has long been used to the days when she has all the pain to resist. When did she cry out because of this little injury? Once upon a time, others would only let her endure. No one would ever say that to herself. Thinking of this, her deep and calm eyes can't help rolling up. Her eyes can't help sticking to Yin Beiqing, who is helping him clean up the wound, and her heart seems to be beating up with great concentration. Does it hurt? She left God until Yin Beiqing put down the tweezers in his hand. Asked softly, she was in a trance, busy drooping her eyes, wanted to shake her head to show no pain, but thought about it, or gently nodded. There is some pain. That's right. The pain has to be said. Yin Beiqing nodded with satisfaction, picked up another porcelain box, opened it, looked at the paste inside, and said, "Is this the way to smear the wound?" Mo Shanghua hasn't recovered from the palpitation of just now, so she only slightly lowers her jaw, droops her eyes, and doesn't know what she is thinking. Yin Beiqing gently drew the ointment with his fingertips and gently smeared it on his careful cheek, just like a craftsman who was carefully carving. He was afraid that if he used more effort, his pain would be aggravated. A man who is usually injured is just bandaged at will and doesn't pay much attention to her. Now, he is so careful and solemn to her. How can he not let the stranger be moved? Yin Beiqing himself didn't care. When he helped Mo Hua daub it, he found the seat and sat down opposite her. He took the small box full of disinfectant cotton and studied it with great seriousness. How strange are the things you use in your usual healing methods. He remembers that the result of previous investigation showed that she was only the daughter of a prostitute who was born in a month. She had been raised in the boudoir of the imperial city in the name of prime minister. There was no adventure. How did she learn such superb medical skills? When asked about this, Mo Shanghua came back to her senses. She took the porcelain box in Yin Beiqing's hand, sealed the lid, and put it away again. She said, "What do you think is the use of so many medical skills piled up in my room? As for these novel things, they're just developed for the convenience of treatment. These are in the modern medical theory. She naturally cannot say. So she can only find an excuse to prevaricate in the past. Fortunately, she was indifferent to everything. Now, when she told a lie, her face was not red and her heart was not beating. When she thought about it, she pretended to be casual and asked, 'Yes, good. How could the Book of the Peoples be on fire out of thin air? Who is Yin Beiqing? Why can't she see her little circus?' But when she doesn't want to say it, she just doesn't know. She takes out 2 pieces of flint from her sleeve with a smile. However, he just showed the flower for a moment, then he quickly put it away again and said seriously, 'It's a natural disaster. God wants you to be my princess all the time. It's fate. You see, our fate is so deep.' Then he took the corner of his lip and began to smile, and his eyebrows and eyes bent. The corner of the flower's lips on the street also can't help but gently curl up. But in his hand, he can't help but push him toward the other side. He gets up and puts the wooden box back beside the bed. 'It's clearly you who made the ghost, which means it's destiny.' 'Nonsense, it's destiny,' Yin Beiqing solemnly denied, just like a follower following behind her. 'However, I'm curious about where the Book of Peoples came from. As she said, she did find it in my room, but it should have been found inadvertently when she deliberately framed it.' Mo Shanghua smell speech. Also don't hide meaning, then explain truthfully. 'This is the previous snow.' Ji repeatedly said that one. Although I don't know how Shiweji got the Wanmin book, she had read it carefully, and it was true. Yin Beiqing's eyes were a little deep, and his smile was a little light. The Book of the People that asked the emperor to allocate funds to recruit soldiers as soon as possible should be fake. Mo Shanghua nodded and simply told the whole story. 'I have already understood their plan, so I forged a fake Book of the People in advance, and then checked the identity of Shiweji by the way. Unfortunately, my current manpower is limited, so I can't find a real identity of Shiweji.' After a pause, she glanced at Yin Beiqing suspiciously. 'Why did you suddenly ask in such detail? Didn't you really take the Book of the People as true and submit it? What's in your head every day? How could I be so stupid?' Yin Beiqing raised his hand and pinched the cheek of Mo Shanghua. He felt helpless and funny. The flower on the street pushes away his salty pig hand, showing a frown, a disgruntled look. However, the more Yin Beiqing saw her appearance, the more he liked her. He was about to raise his hand and pinch it, but he thought of something. His outstretched hand stopped again, and his eyes darkened. 'Now that it's over, why do you want to keep the Book of the People? If not, you won't have something to do with it today.' Does she still want to run away from him one day? At the thought of this possibility, he could not help slowly tightening his big hand and clenching it into a fist. Nature is in case of emergency. Mo Shanghua didn't think much, just casually returned his sentence. Didn't explain carefully, naturally also didn't notice Yin Beiqing gradually dark down eyes color. Silence for a long time, his thin lips opened, eyes a dark color. 'You still want to leave me?' Mo Shanghua was stunned. He didn't seem to expect that he would ask such a question. No matter how dull he was, he knew that he was in a bad mood now. He had already reached the throat of nature is not, and immediately swallowed it back. Mao Guang glanced at the palm of his clenched fist, pondered for a moment, and then said, "This matter is after my careful consideration. I just decided to stay." Seeing Yin Beiqing's dark and deep eyes, she continued, "Although the current situation is still calm, you and I will inevitably get involved in some disputes in the future. If they borrow me to make a fuss and force you to do nothing, then I can use this to make peace with you, so that they will not find a reason why you are wrong." These words were what she had considered before, so her face was still the same at this time, and her eyes did not dodge. Yin Beiqing looked at her eyes, which were also deep and dark, but shining. All the doubts and displeasure in his heart immediately dissipated, and his hands gently put on her shoulder. "But have you ever thought that if this book of the people came out, you would put yourself in a dangerous place?" In his burning eyes, Mo Shanghua slowly shook his head. "Since I dare to do it, naturally I have a certain degree of assurance." After a pause, a layer of watercolor suddenly appeared in her quiet eyes, and her indifferent face seemed to melt down. "Besides, you should try your best to protect me." Before she had time to say the word "bah," she was blocked by Yin Beiqing. Her brain, which was still clear and rational, was blank. She opened her eyes and looked at the enlarged, handsome face in front of her eyes. But before he could react, Yin Beiqing left her lip again, only to kiss her gently, without too much invasion. "You don't have to be so suspicious. You are the princess I married and my wife. I will protect you." He gently took the flowers in his arms and spoke solemnly and seriously. Mo Shanghua was in a trance and stupefied. It took a long time for her to react. Her white cheeks turned red, and she couldn't say a word of shame. Even so, she thought about it again and again, and put her hand on Yin Beiqing's thin waist to give her a response. Yin Beiqing also held her tighter. In a brothel in the imperial city thousands of miles away, Yin Mo sat down in his bedroom and impatiently said to the newly promoted bodyguard, "Haven't you arrived yet? Report back to your highness. The imperial city is full of troubles recently. It's hard for girls to come out, but they should be here soon." The bodyguard knew that his master had been in a bad mood recently. He thought it over and over again and said a lot in an attempt to calm him down. Sure enough, Yin Mo didn't ask anymore, but the gloomy color between his eyebrows couldn't go away anyway. He had originally returned to the city to be granted meritorious service, but before he came to the imperial city, the criminals were robbed under his eyes. When the ministers who looked down upon him in the court saw this, they all fell down on the ground and took a fierce part in his book. As a result, although he had the name of King Ling, he did not even have a proper fiefdom. The emperor still did not give up his name, even under the banner of his mother's wife. What's the difference between him building and living in the palace? In particular, the emperor never expressed half dissatisfaction with him on the surface. On the surface, he was still in favor of him, but it had greatly hindered his plan. In this way, how can he be satisfied? Just as he was thinking, he heard the bodyguard standing quietly suddenly open and interrupt his thought. "Your Highness, she's coming. You go out." Yin Mo Li's eyebrows were gloomy, and his face was as usual. He could not see his happiness and anger. "Your Highness," usually in front of people, very soft female voice. At the moment in front of Yin Mo Li, can't help but die a bit flattery. Such a voice, coupled with his extremely graceful and slender figure, only made people feel pity for him. Unfortunately, Yin Mo Li nodded his head slightly, which was regarded as a response. Lu Qianqian looked at Yin Mo Li, who was full and handsome in front of him. His ruddy lips could not help but gently remind him, "Your Highness, I heard that you are in a bad mood recently. Why don't I have a drink with you?" Then, without waiting for Yin Mo to speak, she had already stepped to the table, picked up the wine pot, and filled the wine cup in front of him. When she changed it, she just poured a cup of tea. Yin Mo Li eyebrow tipped tiny pick on the face shows satisfied color. "You still know your identity." Lu Qian smiled, only took the cup in front of him, did not dare sit with him. "If you drink wine, You will be infected with the smell of wine. I'm a prime minister, usually not out of the gate where to drink. It's natural not to be exposed. If you come out too long, I'm afraid you can't hide it in the mansion. Don't say it's useless. Yin Mo Li nodded slightly, did not pick up the wine cup, directly explained his intention. Jing Zhuoyin connived his son to rob people's daughter, to seize the land. You should know. Lu Qian skillfully nodded, has shown that he knows. Yin Mo Li said, My father doesn't blame me for what happened before. He just says that his merits and demerits are equal, but he is dissatisfied with me at the bottom of his heart. I need to make some achievements to make a compromise. I mention it myself, and I'm afraid that my father will suspect me. You can think of some ways to mention it with the Prime Minister. In fact, if it's just such a small matter, it's not worth Yin Mo Li's calling Lu Qianqian to try to get the Prime Minister to speak. It's just that Jing Zhuoyin is not an ordinary poor man's younger brother. He was originally from a scholar family, and his father was Lorden, who had made great achievements in the war. There are many scholar families involved behind him. No one dares to offend him to manage this matter. Therefore, this matter has been very noisy yang, but no one dares to interfere at will. Now, as long as he broke the thorny case, the emperor would pay more attention to him. Your Highness, I will take it as an imperial edict, and I will let him do it. With a soft smile, Lu Qian's eyes turned light. Your Highness has outstanding ability. I don't think I'll mention it. My father will make a decision in his heart. Yin Mo Li didn't look at him. Hang him out to carry that wine cup. Light way. You should go back. Lu Qianqian smells speech. Pink lips light, open a few minutes, but nothing said, a pair of words, and stop appearance. Yin Mo Li noticed this, and then he cast his eyes. When Lu Qianqian saw him looking over, he hesitated for a while and said carefully, Your Highness, it's not too troublesome for you to always be like this. Why don't you ask the emperor to marry you and me earlier? We'll let your father support you above board. When speaking, there is no shyness or selfishness on the face. Yin Mo looked at Lu Qianqian's delicate and beautiful face with a smile. For a long time, he said, The time has not come. When the time comes, I will propose to the Prime Minister personally and marry you, the Prime Minister's daughter. With that, his lips curved slightly. At present, you just need to stabilize your position in the Prime Minister's office and be a good Prime Minister. Lu Qianqian's eyes light across the bottom of some lost color, pursed lips, slightly blessing body. Yes, Qianqian left. With that, she put on her cloak again and covered her cheek with a veil. Then she retreated, and no one noticed. When she retreated, her soft face suddenly changed, and her eyes were full of unwilling color. God knows how much she has paid to marry Yin Mo Li. Now she has the identity to match him, but he refuses to officially propose to marry him. Even in front of others, she shows a look that she is not familiar with. How can she be reconciled? However, although she was unwilling to break Yin Mo Li's plan, she could only follow his instructions. Otherwise, she would have no chance to marry him. Chinya, go and take out some of my private money. You're going to buy some fine rice and flour, and the flour will be sent directly to the kitchen. Tomorrow, you will let them all steam in a steamed bread. You are preparing 2 big pots, and you will choose a few people to follow me out of the house tomorrow. Mo Shanghua sits at the table with her chin propped up and orders lightly. When Chinya heard the words, she was confused. Princess, why do you prepare these things? We also need 2 big pots to cook the fine rice, which is just the sum of the top and bottom of the house. Are you going to make porridge? Mo Shanghua's chin holding hand followed a starting point. With a rare sense of helplessness on her plain and expressionless cheek, I will not do this kind of thing, but the Lord told me yesterday that there were too many people robbed some days ago, and even killed and set fire. Now, there are many disaster victims outside the city, so I have to go to make porridge myself. Originally, such a thing should have been ordered by Yin Beicheng, but he would pull out a few rich businessmen to shield the outside world. However, he thought that Mo Shanhua's current wind rating was too bad, so he deliberately wanted her to buy the hearts of Yuzhou. More good deeds are done, and as time goes by, the previous things will disappear. What's more, the previous ones were all rumors, and people are all hearsay. Now, if they see them with their own eyes, they will believe their own eyes more. There's also the previous Wu Chang event to pave the way. At this time, strike while the iron is naturally the best. Qin Yadun began to smile, and her wet eyes bent slightly. It's like this, princess. Look, it's not hard work, but a good job to buy people's hearts. The Lord is obviously fighting for a good reputation for you. It must be the recent events that make the Lord's heart. That's what it is. And Mo Shanghua turned her eyes to other places, holding her chin and fingertips slightly bent up, and poked her delicate jaw. By the way, remember to prepare more rice, enough for 7 days. At that time, General Zhao Wei should come back. When Zhao Wei comes back, it means that the bandits will be pacified. At that time, she is distributing some money to the displaced people so that they can return home, so as not to be in such a panic as now and just surround Yuzhou City. Princess, you are obviously talking about Abaigu. Qinya, however, was reluctant to let go. She came over with a face full of gossip. What did the Lord say to you yesterday? And Mo Shanghua pushed her back according to her forehead, got up and turned her back to Qinya and walked to the other side. The words are more and more. Do you understand what I just ordered? Understand, should not understand, maidservant but all understand. Seeing that she was obviously ashamed, Qinya's eyebrows were even more smiling. By the way, princess, I heard that Pingji had been insulting you after she was locked in Beiyuan yesterday. She tried to escape to find the prince. As a result, she was killed by the guards of night patrol. Now she is buried. The shyness between the eyebrows and eyes on the street faded, and her face returned to the usual indifference. Do you remember who she had offended before? Qinya frowned and thought about it carefully. She suddenly felt that her palms were sweating. You mean the guard before? God, how dare they do that? Why not? Mo Shanghua was not frightened. Instead, she asked, Pingji committed all kinds of crimes. All of them are capital crimes. Beiyuan is only a temporary place. It must be dealt with formally in a few days. Anyway, it's a death. But the time of death is different. Who will pursue it? Qinya raised her hand across the clothes and touched her hair. She felt a thrill. But when she thought about it, she was very happy. She didn't know whether it was to comfort me or to comfort me. But it's also her fault. Princess, you don't have to think about it. The important thing is that at present, there's only one concubine left in the south of the mansion. Recently, she has been seriously ill and can't get out of bed. In the future, no one will be looking for your trouble in King Yu's mansion, and our ears will be clean. Is Nanha ill or seriously ill? The top of the eyebrows on the street is slightly raised, showing a bit of surprise. Qinya nodded. I was sick before. I heard that the sick man couldn't get out of bed. I also heard this morning that he is from Yinbei City. He wants to help him finish the task. How can he suddenly get sick now? Is it Yinbei City who wants to make some plans? Thinking of this, her heart was not very quiet. The willow eyebrows had twisted into a ball. Princess, what's the matter with you? Seeing this, Qinya couldn't help looking puzzled. That South Side Imperial concubine was also a hypocrite, and she made trouble for you secretly. Now that she is ill, how can you look worried? Mo Shanghua is thinking. She doesn't answer Qinya's words. She just shakes her head. Just as he was thinking about it, he saw Qin Lin lift the curtain and walk in. He bent over and saluted. Lord, the people around His 13 Highness are coming. They said that they want you to go and have a look at His 13 Highness's illness. Mo Shanghua's thoughts were pulled back, but the tip of his brow could not help but pick a bit. Isn't there 2 highly skilled imperial doctors around Your Highness 13? I don't know. Qin Lin shook his head, and his face was misty. The people who came here were those who were served by His Royal Highness 13. Princess, how can a slave come back? Mo Shanghua drooped her eyes slightly, pondered for a moment, and then said, Don't reply. Qinya, go and get my medicine bag. Let's go. Yes, it's Chen Kong who is in charge of inviting Mo Shanghua. On the way, he is very regular, without yesterday's sharp attitude, until Yin Sichuan's temporary residence. He just stops and suddenly bows to Mo Shanghua. Princess, What happened yesterday was my little impulse. I'm here to make amends for you. I hope you'll forgive me. He is also a delicate person, just like Yin Xuan. He is as gentle and polite as him. Emo Shanghua murmured with admiration in her heart, and her lips were slightly pulled up. There's a reason for this. You are also the protector. I won't blame you. With that, he took Qinya into the inner room. Yin Xuan is still lying on the bed at this time. Her complexion seems to have to turn a little bit. She is a little bit bloodier than yesterday. When she comes in, her gentle eyebrows and eyes are a little softer, which makes people just look at her impetuous heart. Here you are. 13, Your Highness. Emo Shanghua nodded slightly and stood beside his bed. I heard that your health has not improved, but the two royal doctors around you have been waiting on you for many years. I think they should know your condition better than me. What she said was only true, and there was no ambiguity, but she made the two imperial doctors face a red face. One of them, who had quarreled with the flowers in the street, took the lead and said, "Yesterday was my minister's disrespect. Don't blame the princess." Seeing this, another imperial doctor hastened to make amends. "What is this for?" The flower-thin eyebrow on the street suddenly closed up again, some confused hope to Yin Xuan. Cough. Yin Xuan clenched his fist slightly, covered his lips, and coughed twice. Then he took the corner of his lips and said with a smile, "I let Shen Kong cheat you. Originally, I wanted to invite you, but I wanted them to make amends to you. Just because of it." The brow tip of the flower on the road picked a few minutes slightly, the tiny dew surprise color, that your body, now how? Yin Beiqing shook his head with a smile. Although he was pale, he could not see the pain of being tortured by his illness. "I'm old. I just need to raise him for a few days. It's not a problem." After a pause, he glanced at the two imperial doctors again. "It's a bit abrupt to say, and I don't know if it's sincere enough for you. My stomach is not so narrow. I didn't pay attention to it at the beginning. You can rest assured." Emo Shanghua also followed his eyes and went to the two imperial doctors. "Please get up. My qualifications are really not enough. I'm a teacher in front of you." The princess is too modest. After I saw her yesterday, I was really convinced. How can I be called a workman? One of the royal doctors spoke quickly, in a state of being flattered. "Both of you are praising me." Emo Shanghua nodded slightly, his eyebrows drooped, and he was still modest. "By the way, when it comes to apologizing, I lost my courtesy. 2 days ago, His Highness was always outspoken, and I haven't really appreciated it." She frowned and thought about it carefully. After a long time, she tentatively said, "Your Highness has been ill recently. You should only eat something light. Maybe you have something light in your mouth. I heard that, Brother Chun. You have a new restaurant. The cook is from Beijing. Your Highness has been here for so long. Should you miss the taste of Beijing? I'll wait for you some other day. I'm a host. Thank you very much." In order to express gratitude, modern people always treat people to dinner. It should be good for her to do so. "Never thought." Yin Xuan, just a gentle smile, but no joy. "I didn't help anything. You don't have to care too much. If you really want to thank me, why don't you just cook yourself?" Speaking of the back, he had a deep smile on his lips. He looked like a joke, but no one noticed. His eyes flashed bitterly. He frowned a little, and soon returned to normal. "I'm not good at cooking. I'm afraid I'll let your Highness down." Yin Xuan's clear eyes were slightly dark, and the smile on his lips was a little light. "It's okay, I know your mind. Your Highness, are you tired? So I'll stay soon." Seeing this, the flower on the street could not help but jump. She felt that it was better to leave as soon as possible, and then said, "If your Highness is not used to eating and living in the future, you can only let people come to our hospital once." Yin Xuan's eye color is more and more dim, pulling the corner of the lip to smile bitterly. "Since so, Chun Kong, you go out to send flowers out." Chun Kongkai went back to the house. "Your Highness Lu." The princess looked very different from before. When he mentioned the flowers on the street, he obviously lost his tongue and immediately corrected it. In fact, in front of Emo Shanghua himself, he would not be wrong. It's not that he has a bad memory, but that the master's character is really different from that of the past. As a result, When Mo Shanghua wanted to cure Yin Sichuan, he could not remember that this was Miss Lu. In addition, the last time Yin Sichuan came to Yuzhou, he didn't follow him. It was just the first time that Mo Shanghua met after she left the imperial city. Yin Sichuan covered his lips and coughed lightly. His eyebrows and eyes drooped slightly. The world will change. She has experienced such changes again. When he mentioned this, he could not help but feel a bit of pain. It was all my fault at that time. If I were not so useless, I would only drag on such a sick body all day, maybe. Your Highness. When Qin Kong saw this, he opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to comfort him. He was afraid that he would mention his sadness again. Yin Sichuan just gently shook his head, eyes sad. You go down, I'll have a rest. Seeing this, Qin Kong had no choice but to retreat. Yin Sichuan was the only one left in the room. He raised his eyelashes slightly. His long, slender eyelashes were shaking gently, and he seemed to fall into the memory of his eyes. Qinya handed a bowl of thick hot porridge and 2 steamed buns to an old granny. She said in a warm voice, Granny, please slow down. In the porridge shed over there, you can sit down and eat slowly. Don't worry. The grandmother answered and said a few words of gratitude. Then she led her young grandson to the porridge shed. The people in the queue behind her walked forward with bowls. Qinya also had a long line next to him. At a glance, there were all ragged people behind him. Rao Shihua asked several people for help, but they were still not enough. Mo Shanghua is used to the busy life in modern times. She is not willing to sit and help distribute steamed bread and other things. As for those who dare to take the opportunity to make trouble, there are only half of them. Just look at the soldiers near the porridge shed. They will be frightened. Where else will take the opportunity to make trouble? See, the steamed bread maker over there seems to be Princess Yu. Really? Didn't you say she was vicious? Why do you come to make porridge in person? If you're not sure, it's just acting to win people's hearts. No matter whether she wins people's hearts or not, you can see that the porridge can see the grains of rice. In the past, who would give up porridge so much? That's to say, I know it. Yes, those are just rumors. You haven't heard of the things a few days ago. The princess is not a bad person. People inside and outside the city, looking at the simple clothes, personally outside the city, for the refugees' porridge on the street flower. Eyes are glued to the above, whispering discussion, but the 2 places are far away. The street flower there cannot hear scent. They are only busy with their own porridge. It's already an hour later. Qinya took the flowers on the street and sat down to have a rest. Looking at the people in the porridge shed in the distance, she couldn't help sighing. Really poor, said halfway. She could not help but make complaints about it. But they are miserable, and we are not going anywhere. Princess, I made the account book before I came out today, but you don't have much private money now. You are so generous. As long as you can have some soup, no one like you can cook a pot of porridge. I won't use that bag of rice. On the street, flour smells speech, but just light lift eyes, not salty mouth. Rice is little. That can also be called porridge. Can't you and I drink porridge like that? Qinya flattened her mouth. Although she agreed with her, she still said, But princess, according to your practice, I'm afraid the rice and grain you bought won't last 3 days. Look, this is the account book made by my maidservant yesterday. She took out an account book and handed it to Mo Shanghua, thin eyebrow vexed tightly wrinkled together. Mo Shanghua took over the account book and did not turn it over carefully. She turned to the last page and saw that there were 200 taels of silver left on it. Then her face changed a little. She twisted the paper industry and turned over the front content carefully. I've been slack these days, but I haven't paid attention to them all the time. Wait to look over. The flower just closed account book. Brow is frowning to open a mouth. Although she still has dividends from grain stores in Wuzhou County and monthly expenses in the government, according to her current spending level, she is still a little stretched. Seeing this, Qinya can't help shaking her sleeve and said, Princess, there's a reward in the house. It's not expensive to go out and walk. We can't just guard this moo of land. Yes. Mo Shanghua nodded and instantly understood her meaning. It's time to make a good plan. We go back to the house at night. You're going to call Zhang He. It's convenient. I'm not very good at it. I'd better have a look. Then she raised her hand and wiped the sweat on her forehead. She got up and took away the bamboo basket used to put steamed bread in front of her. Since it's hard to be a good person, it's good to do it to the end. Chinya, go and tell them that after they are full, the sick can come to me for free treatment. Chinya is alone. The moment again, sad face gets up. Princess, you see their appearance. Even if you give to see this medicine, who should come again? On the street, flower head, also don't lift of continue to arrange way. Isn't still have 200 liang? But that, no harm. Chin you see mo, Shanghua so insist. The heart is helpless. Had to tell the refugees obediently. When the refugees heard the news, they were more excited and happy than grateful. Chinya only felt the complex tension in her heart, but she was indifferent. Fortunately, the refugees did not want to make trouble for her. All the patients who came to see her were just ordinary patients. No one who suffered from stubborn diseases came to find trouble for her. After doing this, she simply took some money from the government to pacify and send home those who still have a family to return to. For the homeless, she tried to send people to work in Yuzhou City. Since then, only 3 days later, all the victims gathered outside the city gate have been resettled, and the matter has finally been solved. The people in the city are full of praise for the flowers on the street. In the past, all kinds of things seemed to be gone, and few people mention them again. When the refugees are settled, they have no money left in hand, so they immediately ask Chinya to call Zhang He over. Zhang He is still the same as when he was not promoted. When he saw the flowers in the street, he saluted respectfully. Please send me your regards. Steward Zhang, please take a seat. He treats the flower respectfully. The flower naturally will not be cold-faced place. But Zhang Guanshi didn't sit down. He slightly turned his head to the little guy behind him and said, "Bring things here." The little C nodded and presented the contents of the tray in his hand. Returned to the princess. Please have a look at the account books of every shop this month. Mo Shanghua nodded slightly, took over the account book and looked through. You do things very carefully. Zhang He smiles, full of humility. The princess trusts the slave, and the slave should do his best. You put all your heart into it, and I'll remember. Mo Shanghua closed the account and said with a smile, I see what you recorded in the account. The most profitable one seems to be the silk shop. But how can we sell silk so well in Yuzhou? The princess doesn't know. Zhang He didn't think much about it. He replied, this silk shop is just a false name. Most of the goods sold in the shop are coarse linen. Most of the buyers and sellers are Yuzhou people. There's another thing, which is some small things woven with hemp and cotton in Yuzhou. It's a novelty for business people. It sells very well. So, it is. After hearing this, Mo Shanghua nodded slightly, revealing a touch of thoughtful color on her face. She has just turned over these things. Apart from these, the best-selling thing is the grain bought from Zhongzhou. We should have a try on both of them. Since there are so many business contacts, why do I think our business is not so good? After a moment's deliberation, doubts suddenly came back to her mind. Zhang He shook his head and sighed. The princess doesn't know. Our place is poor. We don't even have some good food. The inn doesn't have much money to repair. It's not high class. I'm ordered by the emperor. The merchants are limited. If it's not like the old Master Wu heir of Yu Kingdom, I'm afraid it won't be able to enter the pass. The flower brow on the road suddenly lightly a see-you. She did not know that there was such a law in the kingdom of God. But if it goes on like this, how can the kingdom of God be so rich? Think of here. Her eyes cannot help but emerge some suspicious color. But each pass is like this? Zhang He shook his head, thought about it carefully, and said, Yuzhou is located in the border of the three kingdoms. But in addition to our Yuzhou, there's another place that is more important than our Yuzhou. It's located in the border of many countries, about 200 li away from our Yuzhou. That place is the most open place for business, and many business customers pass there. Is there any other place to do business? There are still many places along the coast, all of which are open to the public. The flowers in the street smell the words, and their faces suddenly sink. Yuzhou was also an important place, but it was restricted everywhere. It seems that the emperor really didn't like Yin Beiqing's son, and his situation was really bad. Go ahead. Thinking that Zhang He was still there, Mo Shanghua collected his mind for a while and said, "Take this account back, and continue to do so in the future. I will call you if you have something." Yes. Zhang He should be at the foot of the pace is a meal, princess, but want to seek some money way. Mo Shanghua did not hide the meaning, then nodded. Hearing the speech, Zhang He knelt down on his knees and said respectfully, "Zhang He is highly valued by the princess. So far, there is no reward for her. If the princess can use it in the future, she will send her to work. The servant will be heartbroken." The flowers in the street did not expect that this picture of he was also such a kind and sincere person. His eyes immediately glanced at Qinya. Qinya came over and helped Zhang He up. "If Zhang is in charge of business, our princess promoted you at the beginning because you are steady and down-to-earth, and you are quite serious. What she wanted was that you could manage the shop well. The implication is that we will not ask for any reward." Zhang He, hearing the speech, refused to get up. Although the princess had nothing else to ask for, the slave could not repay her kindness, and asked the princess to accept the slave's friendship anyway. Seeing this, the flower in the street was moved, but she did not shirk. "I know Zhang's mind. In this way, I will accept your mind. If I really need help, I can only annoy you." Qinya's mouth seemed to be smeared with honey. She helped Zhang He up again and said with a smile, "Zhang is in charge of the business. At that time, our princess will ask you. You know the truth, know the right and wrong, and have the ability. Maybe you can help us solve some big problems." Qinya is the maid of the flowers on the street. If she speaks like this, she will get the blue eyes of the flowers on the street. Other people will be happy for a long time, but Zhang He is still neither humble nor arrogant. He bent over and saluted again. He said, "The concubine's meaning is clear to all the slaves. In this way, the concubine will leave first. When the concubine can use it, she will directly send someone to tell her. Don't be embarrassed." Seeing that Zhang Heyuan had gone, Qinya could no longer resist her joy and came over with a smile. "Princess, this Zhang steward is really a gentleman. In the future, he will have a bright future and a lot of money. You've got a better command of flattery." The flowers on the street smell the words, can't help but slant her one eye. Qinya spat out her tongue in a strange and ancient manner. Qinlin, Mo Shanghua, thinks about things in her heart. She doesn't tell Qin Yaodua in advance. She gets up and calls Qinlin outside. Qinlin hurried into the room, waiting for the order of Mo Shanghua. Mo Shanghua walked up to him and asked directly, "I remember that I sent you to look after the wheat grains I planted in Wujian before, and I also asked you to keep an eye on them afterwards. What's the situation of those wheat grains now?" After discussing with Zhang He just now, it's impossible to make Yuzhou a rich place in the past by making use of businessmen. After all, this trade pass can't be opened by her. Even Yanbei City doesn't have a right. She naturally wants to think of other ways. Qinlin was stunned. As if he had just thought of such a thing, he raised his hand and patted himself on the head. "Princess, I've lost my head recently, and I've forgotten to send someone to see the situation of my goon now. I don't know." Speaking of the back, his voice was getting smaller and smaller. A 5-foot-tall boy seemed to have made a mistake. Standing in the hall, he scratched his ears and scratched his gills with a look of remorse. The flower on the street seized shape, eyebrow immediately tightly askew. It was the slave who didn't pay attention that made such a big mistake. Qinlin knelt down hastily, but when the slave came out of Wujian, those wheat grains were still good. There was no problem for the time being. Seeing this, Qinya wants to ask for help, but she also knows about her brother's fault. She doesn't dare to ask for help, so she has to watch the flowers on the street anxiously and nervously. At that time, the frown of Mo Shanghua didn't soften at all. After a long silence, The expression between the eyebrows suddenly subsided and said, "Qin Lin, I order you to leave early tomorrow morning and go to Wujuan in person. No matter how the wheat grain grows, you must transplant some of it back." Qin Lin knew that Imo Shanghua wanted him to make amends. Naturally, he didn't dare to be vague. He kowtowed hastily. "I understand. I won't let the princess down." Qin Yatin was relieved. In the past few days when Qin Lin has gone, Imo Shanghua asked Qinya to look for many books about planting. Every day, she watches them in the house and doesn't care about the outside world. People from outside think what's wrong with her and talk about it one by one. This day, Imo Shanghua is sitting alone in a study in the hospital. Qinya brings the food and puts it aside without waiting for her orders. When his brow relaxed, he said, "Princess, your highness has been better these 2 days. I heard that you are closed and want to see you." The flower head on the street also did not return, refused directly, say I slept. She seemed to be aware of something wrong. She looked at the books in front of her and said, "I'm telling him that I'm just not feeling very well these days. I'll see him after a few days." But Qinya didn't move. She only turned her lips and said, "Yesterday, the Lord came, but you didn't even make up a reason. You just said that you were busy. How come it's different now that you've changed, your Royal Highness?" Although His Royal Highness 13 was beautiful and gentle, the princess should not neglect the prince. The flowers in the street smell the words, but they don't lift their heads. They say directly, "Close and distant, close and distant." Qinya murmured like she didn't understand. Then she seemed to suddenly realize something. Her dissatisfaction disappeared, and she covered her lips with a smile. It seems that the princess is still interested in the prince. I'll report it to you now. In this boring palace, she finished her daily work, and the rest was just boring. Therefore, she could only spend the fun on Mo, Shanghua, and Yin Beicheng, and she was very optimistic about them. Although the prince is not good-looking, she is also the husband of the princess. She is very supportive of them. If Mo Shanghua knew what she was thinking at the moment, it must be funny and angry. He would punish her to Wujuan. Qin Lin came back in a hurry only 2 or 3 days after he left. As soon as he saw the flowers on the street, he knelt down and said, "Princess, when the slaves arrived, most of them were dead. Only a small piece of them were alive. I'll ask the princess to punish me for my incompetence." Then he knocked his head directly on the ground, and his tone was full of sincere remorse. But he didn't show too much surprise on his face. He only said, "I have offended many people in Wujuan. Naturally, some people especially hate me. This is expected, but it is also because of your dereliction of duty. I've always given you a clear reward and punishment, so I'll fine you 3 months." Qin Lin didn't have the slightest resentment on his face, but he was relieved. No matter how many slaves he punished, he would admit it. Seeing this, Qinya just pursed her mouth tightly, not imploring. "Get up, since the punishment. Imo Shanghua will not continue to study," and said, "What about the remaining living wheat grain?" Qin Lin frowned again and scratched the back of his head anxiously. After a moment's hesitation, Fong turned back and asked the people behind him to take the things. The boy who followed him came in with 2 bundles of golden wheat grain. As soon as Qin Lin saw the wheat grain, he could not help scratching his head again. He was rather embarrassed. "When I went, there were only 2 bundles of wheat grain that were still in shape, but they were mature and could not be transplanted, so I had to harvest them and bring them back." Mo Shanghua smelled speech and did not add accountability, just came forward to take out a wheat grain carefully looked at. The wheat grain is no different from the mature of her world, but the wheat grain produced by this ear is very little, and the growth of the wheat is very small, far less than that of her former world. Although His Royal Highness 13 was beautiful and gentle, the princess should not neglect the prince. The flowers in the street smell the words, but they don't lift their heads. They say directly, "Close and distant, close and distant." Qinya murmured like she didn't understand. Then she seemed to suddenly realize something. Her dissatisfaction disappeared, and she covered her lips with a smile. It seems that the princess is still interested in the prince. I'll report it to you now. In this boring palace, she finished her daily work, and the rest was just boring. Therefore, she could only spend the fun on Immo, Shanghua, and Yin Beicheng, and she was very optimistic about them. If Immo Shanghua knew what she was thinking at the moment, it must be funny and angry. He would punish her to Wu Juan. Qin Lin came back in a hurry only 2 or 3 days after he left. As soon as he saw the flowers on the street, he knelt down and said, "Princess, when the slaves arrived, most of them were dead. Only a small piece of them were alive. I'll ask the princess to punish me for my incompetence." Then he knocked his head directly on the ground, and his tone was full of sincere remorse. But he didn't show too much surprise on his face. He only said, "I have offended many people in Wujuan. Naturally, some people especially hate me. This is expected, but it is also because of your dereliction of duty. I've always given you a clear reward and punishment, so I'll fine you 3 months." Qin Lin didn't have the slightest resentment on his face, but he was relieved. No matter how many slaves he punished, he would admit it. Seeing this, Qin just pursed her mouth tightly, not imploring. "Get up, since the punishment, Immo Shanghua will not continue to study," and said, "What about the remaining living wheat grain?" Qin Lin frowned again and scratched the back of his head anxiously. After a moment's hesitation, Fong turned back and asked the people behind him to take the things. The boy who followed him came in with 2 bundles of golden wheat grain. As soon as Qin Lin saw the wheat grain, he could not help scratching his head again. He was rather embarrassed. "When I went, there were only 2 bundles of wheat grain that were still in shape, but they were mature and could not be transplanted, so I had to harvest them and bring them back." Immo Shanghua smelled speech and did not add accountability, just came forward to take out a wheat grain carefully looked at. The wheat grain is no different from the mature of her world, but the wheat grain produced by this ear is very little, and the growth of the wheat is very small, far less than that of her former world. Yuzhou's land is so barren that the yield of wheat is too small. No wonder Yuzhou's land has few crops, and most of the food is transported from Zhongzhou. "Princess, is there anything strange?" Qinya saw that Immo Shanghua didn't speak. She thought what had happened. She took a wheat grain and looked at it. How did the wheat grow like this? With that, she couldn't help looking at Qin Lin. "Brother, although our former wheat harvest was not very good, it was at least twice as much as this." No wonder the people in Yuzhou were not satisfied. Qin Lin and Qin, you came to Yuzhou from a village in Zhongzhou. The villains are very familiar with it. The soil here is very poor, so it's expected that there's nothing in it. Immo Shanghua put the wheat grain back, and his eyes were gradually far-reaching. "However, what I want to do is to make the land here fertile, not only to solve my own money problem, but also to make Yuzhou people rich." On the one hand, she solved her own problems. On the other hand, Yuzhou became rich, which would be the biggest support for her in Yanbei City. In this way, she really had to do these things. At that time, there was only more than 1 month to autumn, so planting at this time was extremely inappropriate. But Mo Shanghua built a warm shed according to the previous situation in Wujuan, and directly built the warm shed in the dockyard. She did not rush to plant first, but continued to use the knowledge of previous generations, drew drawings combined with modern knowledge, and made irrigation tools according to today's conditions, which could keep the land moist all the year round. Yuzhou doesn't always rain. She also designed some mobile phone rain things to store a large amount of rain, so that irrigation workers can use it. In addition, there are many ways to improve the soil. She is also trying one by one. Although the house was quiet, she was busier than before day by day. But it's impossible to be like this all day long. One day when flowers are busy, Chun Kong, who is beside Yin Xuan, suddenly runs over in sweat. "Princess, my lord is seriously ill recently, and the imperial doctors are at a loss. Please go and have a look." Yin Xuan has helped Immo Shanghua many times. Now seeing that Chen Kong is so anxious, she can't take care of the others. She immediately puts down all the things in hand and rushes over. Emo Shanghua didn't see Yin Sichuan a few days ago, but he had heard that she was much better. Today I saw her, but it was the same as before. But the spirit is obviously better and can still sit on the soft couch. Emo Shanghua doesn't talk nonsense. He directly asks Yin Sichuan to relax his clothes, slightly lift them away, and look at his back. I saw a lot of red acne-like things on the thin back, much bigger than the acne, with different shapes and many scratches on the back. In addition to loss of appetite, can there be vomiting, diarrhea symptoms? Emo Shanghua's face didn't change, so he pulled up his clothes and asked. Yin Sichuan's ears were slightly red, which obviously hurt his shyness, and didn't answer. Seeing this, Chun Kong said, I vomited twice yesterday. Can you show me the prescription of the 2 imperial doctors? Mo Flower slightly nodded, continued. Chun Kong knew the flower meeting in the street and asked. He prepared it early and handed it over. Mo Shanghua took a look. Eyebrows can't help but gently twist. These prescriptions have been tried, without the slightest improvement. Chin Kong was also full of sorrow and anxiety, like, yes, I've tried the local method of boiling my hometown to make medicine guide, but it still hasn't improved. On the contrary, the longer the rash on my body, the more it grows. Yin Sichuan pursed the little blood color of his lips, and his face was helpless. My body is so useless. I just got better a few days ago, and I got sick again. I always trouble them and you. It's not your fault to be weak. Mo Shanghua saw his pale face and said such self-reproach words. His heart could not help but feel a little soft. These imperial doctors are the best prescriptions, if I can only do so. But her eyes light turn. Pores can pay more attention to some in diet. Drink a cup of honey water every morning. Try to eat brown rice. Diet light some. Should be improved. As soon as the voice fell, before Yin Sichuan had time to thank him, he heard a noisy sound of footsteps in the courtyard. Then Zhao Wei's voice came in from far and near. As soon as the general came back to the city, he heard that His Highness was ill. What's the matter? But the royal family didn't entertain him well. When the words were finished, he came in with a big stride, and his eyes fell on Yin Sichuan. Then he glanced at the flowers on the street and the pulse diagnosis she was about to take back, and her eyebrows suddenly twisted. The princess is a girl. Don't you know that men and women are not compatible? And what are you doing? At this time, the task of escorting Mo Shanghua is different from that of escorting Mo Shanghua at that time. His task this time is to protect Yin Sichuan. How can Mo Shanghua make mistakes? Seeing that the situation was not right, Chun Kong explained, Don't misunderstand the general. The princess is helping His Highness with the diagnosis and treatment. Nonsense, but Zhao Wei's face became more and more ugly, and his eyebrows and eyes were filled with anger. She's just a woman. What do you know about medicine? Besides, I've never heard of it in the imperial city before. You dare to let it go. If your highness is ill, can you afford it? Mo Shanghua was originally mild, and her eyebrows and eyes gradually froze, and her thin lips slightly stirred up. I haven't seen you for half a year. The general is much more eloquent, and his temper grows day by day. Zhao Wei gang had just come back from exterminating the bandits, but his whole body was still haunted by some murderous spirit. At this moment, when Mo Shanghua said so, his anger became more and more uncontrollable, and he said angrily, The last general doesn't want to offend the princess, but the princess's recklessness is not to harm our highness. At that time, are you to take the responsibility, or is it the whole Yu palace? Yin Sichuan obviously did not expect such an accident. He coughed violently, and his gentle eyebrows and eyes were a little angry for the first time. General Zhao, cough. Seeing this, Chun Kong came forward anxiously. Your Highness, Your Highness. Zhao Wei was also startled by Yin Sichuan's appearance. He quickly bypassed Mo Shanghua and came forward. After seeing Yin Sichuan's appearance, he coughed so badly that his anger came from his heart. Since I arrived in Yuzhou, my highness has not been well for a day. I heard that he had a serious illness a few days ago. I really don't know whether it was man-made or God's will. Such a meaningful paragraph. Let Shanghua delicate cheek thoroughly cooled down. General Zhao's meaning is someone in my house deliberately murder your highness? Zhao Wei cold-faced did not answer, turned and told Qin Kong, please 2 imperial doctors come over. Then he turned his head and said coldly, no matter what happened, Zhao Wei only told the princess that if something happened to his highness, it would be more than the last general to be buried with. Even the whole house of king, you should bear the burden together. Zhao Wei, who has just returned from the battlefield, is full of anger. Even Yin Sichuan is a little bit pale by his reckless words and deeds. While trying to restrain himself, he said, Zhao Wei, you just came back and don't know anything. Don't talk nonsense. Make amends to her quickly. You don't have to make amends. I see that General Zhao has just made a contribution to the war, but the princess kowtows to him. As soon as his voice fell, he saw Yin Beicheng come in with a cold face. The red birthmark on his left face set off his whole face, which seemed to be flaunting with anger. Seeing this, Yin Sichuan suddenly became anxious and coughed twice again. He explained, Brother Huang, this matter. Your Highness, the last general just didn't mean that. It's just that our Highness's body had been well conditioned before. As soon as he arrived at the palace, he began to hurt and love you. How could the last general not be angry? Zhao Wei interrupts Yin Beicheng's words. The Mao light-like torch sweeps to the Mo Shanghua. In the past, when the inn will escort her, she is a person of temper. I don't know how many slaves she has dealt with on the road, who won't worry about such a violent person. The flower in the street heard the words, and her anger rose up. Which one really wants to harm others will come to the surface. Is General Zhao's mind outside? Or, you may trouble out of no reason cough cough. 2 people quarrel so fiercely. Yin Sichuan is also stimulated chest, depressed, uneasy. Keep coughing. Seeing this, Yin Beicheng simply took the cup and fell to the ground. A crisp sound of porcelain broken. Zhao Weigang, just about to say words, suddenly choked, looking at Yin Beicheng. Yin Beicheng walked to Zhao Wei with a cold face. He took the flower in his arms and said, She's the princess of the king. She can't tolerate criticism and framing. Zhao Wei was stunned. As soon as he wanted to retort, he said coldly, Since Shi San is staying in my palace, he can't even save his life. It's better to go back to the capital early, just in time to cure this acclimatization. All of Zhao Wei's words were blocked in his throat, and he couldn't say a word. Yin Sichuan was impatient and stood up with his hands on the small table. Brother, General Zhao is just straightforward. Don't blame him. Yin Beicheng directly pulled the flowers on the street and walked out, ignoring the meaning. Yin Sichuan saw that the anxiety between his eyes and eyebrows became more and more obvious, and his chest kept fluctuating violently. It seemed that he was going to cause an old disease. Mo Shanghua looks back at Yin Sichuan's appearance, and her eyebrows twist slightly, and her steps pause slightly. Yin Beicheng looked at this, as if he'd been touched by some nerve in a moment. He squeezed her hand tightly in the palm of his hand and quickened his pace to take her away. Princess, you didn't notice just now. My servant walked slowly. I saw that His Highness 13 didn't look very well. She coughed all the time, covering her chest. It seemed that her old disease had recurred. Qinya follows Mo Shanghua and lowers her voice. The frown of flowers on the street suddenly twisted into a ball, and the full red lips gently pursed. Qinya thinks that her voice is very small, and only she and Mo Shanghua can hear it. But unexpectedly, Yin Sichuan, who had been leading the way, flies over with a cold eye. Looking at Yin Beicheng, who has such a good temper, her eyes are like frost now. She shrinks her neck subconsciously because of the cold, and she feels cool on her back. Mo Shanghua saw this, and hurriedly pulled La Qinya and whispered, You go back first. Qinyatin, who was released from prison, trotted away in a hurry. Yin Beicheng turned around again and quickened his pace. Even so, he slowed down after he found that Mo Shanghua didn't keep up. Imo Shanghua always followed him slowly. When he slowed down, he finally walked side by side with him. You were angry with Yin Sichuan on purpose just now. She did not turn her eyes, but her words were very definite. Yinbei City didn't answer and kept walking forward. Imo Shanghua quickened her pace to catch up, and her eyes flashed softly. Are you again? Poor Imo Shanghua, who had just been enlightened, now encountered such a problem. It was hard for her to think about it for a long time. Yin North City Steps this just stopped a meal, but thin lips lightly pursed, still didn't have the intention to speak with her. Flowers on the street, why is he such a big man? Thinking of this, she could not help but feel depressed. She tried to turn her mind away and thought carefully from other conveniences. She said, don't you mean to provoke them and let them leave Yuzhou quickly? Now it's okay to recruit people, but if they don't go, it's impossible for them to train properly, and they will be subject to everything. When Yin Beiqing heard the speech, he pressed his thin lips again. After a long time, he seemed to compromise and finally opened his mouth. I'm annoyed that you haven't seen me these days, but why did you come in time when she was sick? After a pause, he seemed to think of something again, and his face darkened a little bit. It all happened temporarily, and I didn't deliberately arrange half a minute. So it is. The flower on the street hears the words, and her eyes glide with a touch of unknown emotion. Her white fingertips bend slightly. I just want to thank him for helping me before. What's more, if he really has a problem in our house, we'll take it as a disaster. Yin Beiqing's face was not half softened, and his eyes were still suspicious. But you had a period with him before. Yin Sichuan and had a paragraph is the original owner. Where's her? Imo Shanghua, secretly in the heart, abdomen some, green like thin fingers gently pinch his sleeve. The past, what can I mention? I've been completely cut off from you since I set foot on the carriage where I married you. Yin North City, quietly staring at her, a pair of quiet pupil inside the eyes bright, I do not know what to think. For a long time, the faint light in his eyes flashed and completely calmed up. His hands could not control holding the soft and boneless hands of flowers in the palm of his hand. I see your heart. See my heart. Imo Shanghua was stunned and asked in reverse. Fool. Yin Beiqing did not explain, but turned around and took her hand and walked slowly. Just now, the color of her eyes had converged. However, what you just said is a good way. It could be regarded as crooked and upright. The flower in the street hears the words, but her steps are just a little, and her eyebrows are slightly frowning. But the matter just happened has nothing to do with Yin Sichuan. He has helped me many times. If I use her like this, when did I say I was going to use him? Yin Beiqing frowned, and his face turned black again. Even if we want to make use of him, he can't go now. Can I really drive them away? You think highly of my status as King Yu. Say he just still tightly hand in hand with Imo Shanghua together of big palm, suddenly a loose, direct head also don't return of brush away. Flowers on the street, she just raised a mouth. How to move so big anger. Thinking of this, her heart suddenly depressed. She just didn't want to be an unruly person, but also for the sake of that human feeling. She never had any other idea, so he just walked away. Thinking of this, she could not help but have another headache. You better go back to Wu Yuan first. Maybe Qinya knows something. When she got back to the dockyard, she told Qinya about it from beginning to end, but cleverly concealed the matter between Yin Beiqing and her. She only said that she wanted to make a plan to let Yin Sichuan and others leave Yuzhou earlier. Qinya also frowned and thought hard for a long time, but she didn't know what to do. Qin Lin on one side was also the first to, and said, if it's for the great cause of Yuzhou, it's natural to ask His Highness to leave quickly. But the slave just heard that his old illness has recurred. If he wants to go on the road, he's afraid that he can't, otherwise he'll be in serious trouble. Did it really recur? Although Imo Shanghua had guessed for a long time, he was still surprised after hearing it. No, I called the imperial doctor just now. Qin Lin nodded and answered truthfully. If so, I'm afraid I don't have to think about anything. After all, No matter what they think of, Yin Xuan can't move there. It's just that. It's better for her to go to see what's going on with Yin Xuan and then make a decision. When she thought of it, she felt more depressed. She sent Qin Lin and Qinya to have a rest. Then she waited until late at night to sneak into Yin Xuan's courtyard. As before, Yin Xuan went to bed early. But this time, before her hand could touch his pulse, he woke up and looked at her gently. Mo Shanghua was just a little surprised to pick an eyebrow, and then saw that he was not very surprised, so he understood in his heart. Already knew I would come? Yin Xuan nodded gently and sat up with his hands on the bed, leaning on the soft pillow. You come to see my illness? Your Highness is so smart that he can't hide it from you. The flower on the street smiles and simply takes a low stool to come over and sits down before he collapses. I just don't know if your Highness is willing to cooperate this time. Yin Xuan Mao Guang, when run of looking at her, didn't open mouth. A moment later, he stretched out his wrist. The flower on the road is clear, immediately put the thin finger up, slightly astringent eyes, fine auscultation. Yin Xuan looked at her so quietly. His lips moved, but he couldn't hold back. He opened his mouth. General Zhao is impatient. He came back from the killing place, and his mind is uncertain. Only in this way can he contradict her. Don't blame me. My illness is not because of you, and you don't want to feel sorry in your heart. It's nothing to do with your Highness, and I'm not guilty. Mo Shanghua at this time, just diagnosed pulse, had also did not left the sentence. At the beginning of this incident, Zhao Wei had some brain problems, and it was she who hurt Yin Xuan. She did not accept Yin Xuan's apology instead of him at the moment, and naturally she did not blame herself for Yin Xuan. Yin Xuan alone, as if didn't expect Mo Shanghua to speak so directly, a long time to come back to God, some absent-minded mouth. You than half a year ago seems to be different. I've always been like this since I left the Imperial City. My Highness came here less than half a month last time, so I didn't get to know him. Knowing that he was thinking of the original owner again, he frowned a little. I'm sorry, I always mention that. Yin Xuan reaction after knowing, eyes suddenly surge up a bit of guilt. Mo Shanghua shook his head and said in a soft voice, Your Highness today is just impatient. It's not a big problem. It's just that this acclimatized disease is still not getting better. Since the old disease has not been triggered, it is much easier to handle. Yin Xuan seems to see her mind suddenly silent down. After a long time, he just pulled his lips and said with a smile, I can't take care of my body. It seems that I really need to go back to Beijing as soon as my brother said. Speaking, his eyes seemed to contain a special feeling in the eyes. So looking at the flowers on the street, it seems to be waiting for an answer. Mo Shanghua couldn't understand his complicated mood, so he just talked about the matter. If you go back to Beijing, the disease will naturally heal without any medicine. Besides, your Highness lives in the Imperial City all the year round. The environment in the Imperial City is many times stronger than that in Yuzhou. It's a place of outstanding personality. Naturally, it's the best for your Highness to regulate his body. Yin Xuan, who was eager for the arrival of flowers in the street, suddenly fell into the ice, and his whole body gradually became cold. He was not a dull man. During his time in the universe, he had already seen that there had been a great change in King Yu's mansion half a year ago. What Yin Beiqing's words meant was his own speculation. However, he did not expect that Mo Shanghua was really integrated with Yin Beiqing's husband and wife. In the past, he could cheat himself. Those were just for fun, which was what Mo Shanghua had to do in order to settle down in Yuzhou. Now, Mo Shanghua's words have convinced him that they were just self-deception. I'm the one who embarrassed you. His eyes drooped, and the long and thick eyelashes covered all the bitterness in his eyes. Why the embarrassment? Mo Shanghua didn't think so much at all. Seeing his appearance, he realized in his heart, I didn't mean anything else. I just said it as a doctor. Yin Xuan slightly raised his eyes and pulled out a bitter radiance from his lips. I know. However, I have been in Yuzhou for quite a long time, which has caused you a lot of trouble. In addition, now that General Zhao has returned triumphantly, there is no need for us to stay. Tomorrow I will say goodbye to my brother. Tomorrow. The flower on the street frowned tightly. Is it too hasty? I'm afraid your body can't bear it. Yin Xinchuan shook his head with a wry smile, and his look in his eyes gradually became firm. One day when I was in Yuzhou, my father, mother, and concubine would worry about me more, and I shouldn't let them work more for me. Mo Shanghua didn't expect that Yin Xinchuan would be so happy and decided to come down. For a moment, he still couldn't get back to God. After a long time, he just looked down and said, "Is that really the only way?" Now she was afraid that he saw her situation in Yuzhou and wanted to help her. Yin Xinchuan raised her eyebrows and eyes slightly. Her eyes were soft and complex. She shook her head gently under her serious eyes. Mo Shanghua understood this and could not help sighing. "I told you that I am not the Lu Qianqian I used to be, and I am not qualified to accept your feelings and your efforts." Yin Xinchuan gently shook his head again and looked at her with serious eyebrows. His voice was gentle and gentle. "I also warned myself like this, but I found that my mood is no longer what it used to be. What I'm doing now is just following my heart, not what you think." Pause, his eyes slightly coagulate. "As long as you are good, then good." The more I look at Yin Xinchuan, the more uncomfortable I feel. I can't help but turn my eyes and say seriously, "What you have done to me is not what I should bear, so I will remember what you have done, and I will pay back it in the future." With that, she turned around and left in a hurry. Yin Xinchuan looked at the back of the flowers on the street, and he could not help whispering, "Flowers on the street." It's still him. She was called by her present name for the first time. Lord Mo Ling, who had just arrived at the news, could not help hesitating when he thought of what he had just heard. He did not answer Yin Beiqing's question. Yin Beiqing seemed to have a foreboding feeling in his heart. He folded his palms slightly and said without expression, "I'll ask you where the princess is going." Mo Ling still hesitated for a while, then slowly said, "The princess has just gone to Her Royal Highness." This words just take off. Mo Ling then feel the whole body breath of cold. The whole person as if suddenly to a very cold place in general, cold unceasingly. Looking at Yin Beicheng, he was just a face with no expression. At the moment, he was covered with a layer of frost. He couldn't see, all his eyes like a bottomless abyss. At the moment, there was a storm and then slowly dense. "Don't be angry, Lord. Maybe it's not what you think." Mo Ling immediately knelt down and comforted in a low voice. "Get out." Yin Beiqing didn't look back. His thin lips slowly squeezed out a word. His voice was just like that from the ice hole. It was cold and wet. Mo Ling is very worried looking at Yin North City, slightly stepped forward, and then seems to think of something or will foot back, turned out. When Yin Beicheng was alone in the room, his clenched fist suddenly lifted up and hammered heavily on the sandalwood table in front of him. The sandalwood table, which had been used for several years, suddenly broke into countless pieces under his hand and fell to the ground in pieces. However, the dark color in his eyes was not half eliminated. "To leave today?" Hearing the speech, Zhao Wei stood up excitedly. "Your Highness, now I have just returned to Yuzhou. You're not well. How can you go back like this? At least we have to stay for half a month." Before Yin Xinchuan opened his mouth, he felt a burst of itching in his throat. He held his breath slightly and pressed the cough back with great difficulty. Then he said, "I was just short of breath yesterday. It didn't matter, but the acclimatization was quite serious. The imperial doctor said that I had to go back to the city as soon as possible to recuperate." But Zhao Wei twisted his eyebrows, leaned forward slightly, lowered his voice and said, "Your Highness, Your Majesty has entrusted you and me to do our duty as an inspector before you leave. You must not forget it." Yin Xinchuan's eyebrows and eyes remained unchanged. He said in a warm voice, "I have been in Yuzhou every day since you suppressed the bandits. How can I not fulfill my duty?" Zhao Wei choked, thought about it, and then said, "But your Highness spent most of his time in King Yu's residence. He hasn't even been to the barracks. How can he say, Inspector? Yin Sichuan's soft eyebrows suddenly coagulated, and he was a little confused. When did my father tell me that he wanted to go to the Imperial Brothers' barracks to check? Are you still afraid of your brother's support and self-respect? At the moment, the original doubts in my heart were cleared up, and I felt a chill in my heart. Their father was so suspicious that he could understand Yin Beiqing. But now the most important thing is that it's hard to get Zhao Wei to agree. It seems it's the only way. Thinking of this, his hand, which was originally hidden in his sleeve, suddenly tightened. His well-defined fingers deftly opened a package of oil paper in the palm of his hand and scattered the powder in it all over the whole sleeve robe. Your Highness, be careful what you say. Zhao Wei did not expect that Yin Sichuan usually looked at such a gentle person, and even interrupted his voice. After all, this is Yuan's mansion. There's so many ears and eyes, so we need to be restrained. Yin Sichuan's delicate brow suddenly slightly frowned. General Zhao, the Emperor's elder brother, is romantic and willful. What kind of eyes and ears can you have in the mansion? Even if there is, I'm afraid it's arranged by others. When he spoke, his clear eyes flashed slightly. Zhao Wei was careless and didn't pay attention to it. He said, The last general thought so, but His Majesty was worried that someone would take advantage of His Highness Yu's personality to do something rebellious. That's why I should pay attention to it everywhere. He fixed his eyes on Yin Sichuan and said, Your Highness, the last general also knows your physical condition, but there are many things that have not been explored clearly in Yuzhou. There are countless doubts on Princess Yu. Please be patient for some time. When the last general has explored clearly, he will go back to the city immediately. Yin Sichuan's hand holding the teacup was tight. His eyebrows were slightly fixed, but he pretended to be relaxed. General Zhao thinks too much. She is just a woman, so she is smarter. She had such a big change in the Imperial City before, so her character changed greatly. Now she lives much better in Yuzhou than in the Imperial City. How can she destroy these things by herself? Zhao Wei carefully considered Yin Sichuan's words. He felt that there was some truth in his heart, but before he could speak for approval, he suddenly thought of something in his mind and blurted out, Your Highness is still thinking about the old love. Yin Sichuan's originally gentle and calm face cooled a little, and his brow was also tightly wrinkled. General Zhao, she thought she was a wife, but would you entangle a married woman more? You have gone a little too far. He is always generous and gentle, but he is actually a handsome and gentle young man. He can't even say a few words, but now he is not happy about it. Zhao Wei immediately feels that he must be thinking of something wrong and quickly rises to make amends. I hope Your Highness Haiyan will continue to talk nonsense. However, His Highness has to listen to the words of the last general. The Princess Yu is really suspicious. The last general must stay and explore carefully. Yin Sichuan didn't respond, and the discomfort that he just had to endure suddenly surged up. His throat itched and he coughed. Although Zhao Wei is used to Yin Sichuan's body, his brow still can't help wringing. Your Highness, it seems that he should take good care of his body. When Yin Sichuan felt comfortable in his throat, he moved his hand to the place where he put his clothes. He raised his hand and lifted the tight sleeve robe that covered his arm. I saw that it was just a rash all over his back. I don't know when it climbed on his arm. It was all over his arm, which was more terrible than the previous back. This. When Zhao Wei saw this, his face suddenly changed, and he couldn't speak for a long time. Yin Sichuan gave a wry smile and pulled down his sleeve robe again. I don't know, General. I've got dehydration today. Now I can still maintain such a spirit. It's just that the Imperial doctor used medicine to support me. Then he covered his lips and coughed a few times, and his face became more and more pale. Zhao Wei's face completely changed. He looked at Yin Sichuan very seriously. How do the Imperial doctors say? Yin Sichuan leaned on the cushion behind him. The meaning of the Imperial doctor is that only when he returns to the Imperial City can he recover without medicine. The more he delays, the more serious he will be. I'm afraid that even the old diseases will be involved. Among Zhao Wei's orders, the most important thing is to protect Yin Xuan. It doesn't matter if he fails to suppress the bandits. Only Yin Xuan. If he does have an accident, he is afraid that his military accomplishments are not enough. Thinking of this, his face became more and more dignified, and he had to look down and think carefully. After a long time, he raised his eyes and sighed. In that case, the general will go to prepare the carriage and immediately escort His Highness back to the city. Yin Sichuan heard a cough, big stone. This just fell down. Your Highness is leaving now? Why are you in such a hurry? Where are people today? At the beginning of hearing this news, Imo Shanghua was surprised and could not help throwing out several questions. Don't worry, Princess. Qin Lin wiped the sweat on his forehead and said, It said that His 13 Highness is not in good health. He has to go back to the Imperial City to warm up. Now he's on his way. The Lord himself has sent him. Now he should be at the gate of the city. Imo Shanghua looked at the sky outside, and her pretty eyebrows suddenly frowned. It's dusk now. Can't you sleep in the wilderness at this time? And why didn't you tell me? When people come, she and Yin Beiqing go together to welcome them. If they really want to leave, she should also send them. How can Yin Beiqing not even tell them? Qin saw that the flower on the street was not looking well, so she poured a cup of tea and gave it to her. Maybe it's the rush of the 13th Royal Highness, and the Lord didn't have time to tell her. The matter hasn't been made clear yet. Don't get angry. Imo Shanghua was not happy in her heart, so she took a sip of the tea cow. Seeing this, Qin Lin hesitated for a moment and asked carefully, Princess, do you want to see it again? Hearing this, Qin turned around and glared at her brother. She said angrily, Brother, your Highness is also a foreigner. If Wang Fei goes out to see her off now, won't she be criticized and upset? Princess, brother, he didn't think of this layer. Don't blame him. Qin Lin responded and knelt down. I'm stupid. I nearly hurt the princess. The princess should not take it seriously. I'll just let it go. Imo Shanghua shook his head and asked Qinya to help Qin Lin up. It doesn't matter. Besides, I didn't plan to send it. She is not the original owner. She has no other feelings for Yin Xuan. She only owes some human feelings. Naturally, she will not be angry just because of this. At this time, she was more concerned about the wheat grains in her heart, so she got up and walked towards the courtyard, saying, Qin Lin, yesterday I sent you to ask Mr. Guanqing if there will be rain these days. Do you ask? Qin Lin nodded and followed. Sir, it will rain tomorrow. Mo Shanghua stooped into the greenhouse and looked at the loose land in the greenhouse. Her face softened slightly. It's done very well here. By the way, if it rains in a few days, remember to prepare the rain storage materials. Yuzhou will have less rain, so don't miss it. Yes, Qin Lin answered, then thought of something and said, By the way, Princess, I've inquired about the price of the seedlings. It seems that we need a lot of silver. We don't have so much money on hand a few days ago. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.